Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
The education minister weighs in on the prime minister's latest comments about corruption in the country.
An interesting turn in the Clico insurance saga as BAF Financial is set to take over.
3 men are brought before the magistrate's court today to face murder charges.
Prime Minister's press secretary responding to a poll that suggests that support in the government is waning. That story straight ahead.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina Dragovich. Topping news tonight, amid opposition claims that Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis is bad-mouthing the Bahamas abroad, Education Minister Jeff Lloyd today defending Minnis, who said during an interview in Lima, Peru, that the Bahamas loses $200 million annually to corruption. Lloyd says there's a culture of slackness, not just in government, but in Bahamian society. Jasmine Brown reports.
Lloyd, who was present in Peru for the prime minister's speech, blamed a culture of slackness for the hundreds of millions of dollars lost due to corruption each year.
We are enmeshed in a culture of slackness, corruption, and dishonesty. I'm talking about an entrenched culture, I'm not talking about episodic instances here, there, and so on. This is the culture, a way of doing.
Lloyd's comments come in response to the Prime Minister's assertion that the Bahamas loses over $200 million a year due to corruption. While attending the 8th CEO Summit of the Americas, which focused on transparency and combating corruption, Dr. Minnis said on Monday that corruption itself accounts for about 5 to 10% of loss of GDP revenue. He was in Peru at the time. However, Minnis did not say how he arrived at that figure and did not provide anything to substantiate such a claim. His education minister insisted today the problem has been allowed to fester for too long and has now reached immeasurable levels.
Incalculable. Incalculable. It is absolutely astonishing to me to observe the nature of the slackness and inefficiency in the public sector and throughout Bahamian society, which I have been a fierce enemy of all my life, because everybody knows that I am a person, basically, they call me no nonsense and a discipline. It's just nonsense.
The Prime Minister's comments come 1 year after Transparency International listed the Bahamas as the top-ranking country in the Caribbean for the least amount of perceived corruption. In January 2017, the Bahamas came in at number 24 of 174 countries on the list, ahead of Barbados, which topped the list for the least corrupt country in the Caribbean basin. Combating corruption was a top campaign promise for the F&M ahead of the 2017 general election. Lloyd says their mandate still stands today.
You hear with your slackness and you could just, and you know why? We have permitted it. It's over. All right? New day. Different day. This foolishness that we have permitted in our Bahamian is finished. All right? You could take that to the bank.
Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Well, opposition leader Philip Davis is demanding that the Prime Minister provide statistical evidence to substantiate his claim that the country is losing $200 million annually to corruption. This as he accused Dr. Minnis of bad-mouthing the Bahamas abroad every chance he gets. In a voice note to Progressive Liberal Party supporters, Davis called Minnis's comments inexcusable and inexplicable, questioning whether the Prime Minister has common sense.
This bad-mouthing of our country shows that common sense is not common. To support his unfounded allegations of a corrupt country, he claimed that $200 million was lost to corruption. The Prime Minister cannot make such an assertion without saying on what empirical data he bases his statistical assertion. I ask him to provide the evidence.
Davis reminded Minnis that the Bahamas was listed internationally as the least corrupt country in the Caribbean just last year.
I have said this to him before. The Bahamas is the least corrupt country in the region. The international community accepts that this is so. Notwithstanding the facts, the Prime Minister goes around the world, and the best he can do is tell the world, in defiance of the truth, that the country is corrupt. The Prime Minister's conduct is inexcusable and inexplicable.
The PLP leader says during the Prime Minister's visit to Lima, Peru, he had the opportunity to highlight the country's many attributes. However, in a forum where he should have been promoting the Bahamas as a safe place to invest, Davis says Minnis chose to sustain his steady diet of negative news.
I urge him, stop it. Say good things about the Bahamas, not bad things. You are the country's Prime Minister, not a foreign agent. You should be our chief promoter. I urge his colleagues to put a brake on his propensity to spread bad news and urge him to spread the good news about our country.
And the controversial $5.5 billion oil refinery project on Grand Bahama will be monitored by a recently appointed committee. That's according to Press Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Anthony Newbold, who says the OBAN deal won't be allowed to continue if it becomes clear that Grand Bahama's environment will suffer.
There's a committee that's looking at OBAN. And all I want to say about OBAN is the government has committed that we will not allow anything to damage the environment of Grand Bahama. We're not letting any project in there that will be detrimental to the well-being of those people.
Newbold was also asked for an update on the missing OBAN file that disappeared from the Bahamas Environment, Science and Technology Commission. Newbold says as far as he's aware, the matter is still under police investigation. As for whether the newly formed committee has the power to stop the deal,
They're monitoring what's going on. No.
Or just to monitor what's going on?
They're monitoring what's going on.
So the project is essentially a go. It's
proceeding as was intended. If at some point it's decided that it won't happen, then obviously that would be communicated to the public, whatever that decision happens to be. But right now, it continues as was planned.
And the ongoing saga involving CLECO policyholders taking yet another turn as medical insurance policies are set to be canceled, and the remainder of CLECO's portfolio is set to be handed over to BAF Financial. Kyle Joaquin has that.
We're managing those clients who continued to pay their premiums for the last 8-9 years. Only those clients.
The change is set to take effect within the next 45 days. This handover covers over 4,000 policyholders, according to BAF Financial Managing Director Sandy Morley. Since CLECO went into liquidation in 2009, policyholders have been in limbo, with many making payments and wondering when they could cash out. Early last year, some policyholders began receiving payments in installments.
Essentially, what we would be doing is collecting premium payments on their behalf and also providing policy owner services. Okay, so policy owner services would entail we would be adjudicating and issuing payments for claims on their behalf. We would be processing surrenders, loan applications, etc., etc. So it's really the full management of portfolio, similar to what we do here every day.
Now, this changeover does not include those CLECO medical insurance policy holders. Sadly for them, come next month, their policies will be canceled and they will have to seek a new medical insurance provider, either at BAF or elsewhere.
All of their existing medical policy holders, their policies would be canceled effective May 18th. So our management agreement would only entail the life policies and not the medical policies because they're all going away.
Morley said that was the decision of the liquidator. He said, here's one thing policyholders should know.
We're not buying or acquiring the portfolio. We're simply providing a service for the liquidator. Okay, so therefore I think ultimately the liquidator is still responsible for the portfolio. BAF is not in any way responsible for or liable in any way to them in regards to their policies.
Again, Morley is asking for policyholders to remain calm as this changeover will not take effect until probably the next 45 days. Reporting from BAF Financial for our news, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
The forensic audit into the financial affairs of Bahamas Power and Light cost the power company $300,000, according to BPL chairperson Darnell Osborne. Ernst & Young, which was engaged after fraud was uncovered at the power company, completed its audit last August. Minister of Public Works Desmond Bannister tabled the report in the House of Assembly on November 8, 2017. The expense for the audit came out of BPL's budget. EY found, among other things, that the invoice approval and payment process that was in place allowed for fraud to go undetected for several months. Auditors identified 41 checks totaling over $1.8 million made to 13 fictitious vendors and 3 checks totaling over $126,000 made to legitimate vendors. Well, Press Secretary Anthony Newbold responding to a poll that showed the F&M government has lost some support since its election win. Jared Higgs tells us more.
Press Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Anthony Newbold, seemed to agree today with a pollster who recently suggested the government is suffering from a drop in support over its failure to articulate the Minnis administration's achievements since taking office.
Things happen that throw you off. Any number of things have happened, beginning with the hurricanes. So you get sidetracked because things happen. There's always an agenda. Are we communicating that as best we can? No. I don't think anyone thinks that we do. And it's all of our fault for doing that. And you're right. This is part of that. This is part of why this was instituted.
Newbold also addressed criticisms that the current government, like its predecessors, racked up high travel costs due to oversized travel delegations, with many of those trips not being announced to members of the press. Newbold acknowledged that at times the press only realizes that a minister has traveled when they see it on social media.
Or when they return. And we're working on getting them to, because they know when they're going to travel. They do know that. And so we're working on getting them to understand the need to say before they leave. I don't say that this government is sending gussie-may delegations, but that's a matter of, some people may think that. One of the major criticisms of the Progressive Liberal Party's government was, first of all, we don't know where you're taking all these people and what they're doing. So what are they doing that is benefiting the Bahamian people? We don't know. You don't tell us.
The Prime Minister and several of the ministers, including Foreign Affairs Minister Darren Henfield, recently traveled to Peru to attend the 8th Summit of Americas, with Minnis and Henfield's wives also making the trip. The PM then led a delegation to London to attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, with Newbold revealing that more than one Bahamian delegation is attending the conference. Social Services Minister Lanisha Roll is one of those ministers traveling in a separate delegation. Reporting for our news, I'm Jared Higgs.
In other news, 2 men were charged in the magistrate's court today in connection with a recent murder on Homestead Street. Giorgio Bain was in court and filed this report.
3 men believed to be responsible for 2 separate murders that took place this month, less than 24 hours apart, that rocked the inner city community, were brought before the magistrate's court today to be charged with murder. Officers of the Central Detective Unit brought 26-year-old Dennis Barther of Lincoln Boulevard, dressed in the blue shirt and jeans pants, and 28-year-old D'Amico Molly, also of Lincoln Boulevard, dressed in the plaid hoodie, before Magistrate Shubu Solar Swain to answer to the charge of murder in connection with the shooting death of Kenneth Hasty Camp. According to police reports, shortly after 8 p.m. on April 9th, a man was standing outside his residence on Homestead Street when a black Nissan March pulled up. 2 men got out and opened fire, hitting the victim. The man was rushed to hospital where he succumbed to his injuries. Both men were not required to enter a plea and were denied bail. However, attorneys for the 2 men, Philip White and Ian Cargill, told the court that their clients reported being beaten by officers of CDU. Cargill requested that Morley be allowed to see a doctor and said he had made this request since Saturday. The case will proceed by way of a voluntary bill of indictment. The 2 men returned to court on June 13th. Also arraigned in the magistrate's court on Tuesday was Jerome Johnson, seen in the black hoodie. He was charged with the April 11th murder of Gordon Newbold. According to police reports, the victim was outside his Ackland Street home when a silver vehicle pulled up. A male exited with a firearm, opened fire, and fled the scene. The victim was pronounced dead in hospital. Johnson, who was represented by attorney Dion Smith, was not required to enter a plea and was denied bail. He was remanded to prison and returns to court on June 13th to be presented with a VBI. Reporting for Our News, I'm Georgia Bain.
Still to come on Our News, the fate of 200 contract workers in the Ministry of Education unknown, plus the colors of life to light up the Cancer Society's Gala Ball. That and more when Our News returns.